All right, guys, welcome to another episode of the Unknown Simplicity podcast. Today we have Jacqui Gonzalez. She's a licensed clinical social worker who specializes in the field of mental health. So today we talk about how fitness can play a big, important role in the improvement of your mental health. Okay, I want to apologize in advance. The audio was a little off. We had some background noise. I was driving in my car and this was a phone conversation, so you might hear a little bit of noise in the background. Please block all of that out. Focus on the words, focus on the conversation. A lot of good insight here, a lot of good practical advice. All right, so focus, pay attention. Here we go.
Yeah, it's been so long that we had to catch up and we started talking and we had a few things in common. And then the conversation got a little more deep. And yeah, I would like to maybe have you just introduce yourself and who you are and what you do.
Okay. So yeah, we reconnected. It was cool. It's actually funny, how we were friends and we're simpatico on some of the things regarding, especially like mental health and fitness. But
Yes.
So a little bit about me. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, which just means I am a social worker that practices within the field of mental health. So I work as a psychotherapist.
Okay.
And I've been in this field for about going on 5 years, but I have about 15 years experience in mental health and just human services.
Wow.
I am really, my area of focus or my area of interest, I would say, is trauma primarily, but I do see a wide range of various mental health disorders, anything from anxiety, depression, PTSD to personality disorders. And so, yeah, that's a little bit about me.
That's a lot going on, right? That's like the number one thing in this world, right? Mental health's a big issue right now, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And a lot of people...
Especially the pandemic.
Because the pandemic, you've seen a rise, huh?
Yeah, well, especially after the pandemic, because so many things and so many factors were taken away from people, mental health has always been a factor, but I think people really realized, certain things, part of my routine, my schedule, really helped my mental health. And when it was taken away, there's, kind of after effects of it.
Do you think people just maybe don't have, is it because they don't have maybe goals or something they're striving for, to where it's almost like when people that were in the military, they had that routine, right? That set discipline, a set, like they're very strict. And then when they're out the military, a lot of them they just don't have that set strict discipline anymore, and they feel lost. Is that what you think is similar to that?
I think that's definitely a good comparison. I mean, when thinking of veterans and people that serve in the military, there's also a lot of other components based on what they see, if they are deployed, if they're in war. So obviously there is a lot of, that's where, honestly, a lot of where we recognize PTSD at first, and then we're realizing that so many other things can be traumatic, right? So like people that have experienced sexual abuse or things like that. But to your point is that, yes, being removed from a routine, from a schedule, from any just regular rhythm of life, when that rhythm is disrupted, it can affect your mental health. And I think that's the aftershock that we're noticing in the pandemic, is that routines were shifted, adjusted, changed. And while a lot of us, were resilient and pivoted and changed course and found ways to make things work or work towards other goals, at the same time, other things were affected or issues resurfaced because we were removed from our schedules, routines, and regular day of life.
Wow. And so I think we spoke, and you work with mostly children, right? Or is that correct? Teens?
So children and adolescents has been the big bulk of the population I've worked with. But in working with children and teens, I've obviously worked with parents, families. So I would say my area of focus regarding demographic is primarily teenagers and young adults. But I have worked with adults before. Doing that, I was working with adults, in cancer care and in a different capacity.
And wow. So I guess now the topic that I want to talk to you about, how this can all relate, is well, first I'll go back to the tattoo shop. We were tattooing you and we were talking, and we found out that you also run, and you're also a big believer in training and getting out there, getting some sun, just getting moving. And also, obviously, I do that too. I run every day, and I'm big on fitness and that mental health as well. How do you think, let's just say running, just getting outside and just going out, or maybe even walking, how does that relate to mental health? Like, how can that benefit you as far as your health?
So, I mean, the thing is, to be honest, there's like so many studies connecting to, so I wouldn't want to bore anybody with it, but there's actual, chemicals in our brain that are activated. Serotonin and dopamine are a big one that are mentioned because those are the ones that send off pleasure feelings to our bodies. And scientifically it's shown that exercise, any form of activity to a certain heart rate can actually have the same effect as antidepressants. Wow. So walking, running, physical activity, I think it's just a matter of first making sure that you're consulting with like a doctor or someone you're seeing to make sure you are able to, depending if you have a health condition or not, right?
Yeah.
And then in finding the physical activity that works for you is actually just being mindful of doing it. For me, like you mentioned, we were talking about our experiences with running specifically.
Yeah.
I had such a mental block with running, and I realized that mental block really came from years prior. When I was a kid, I used to play sports. I did softball, soccer, lacrosse. So I played a lot of sports.
Yeah.
But when it came to the running, right, the assertion of that type of cardiovascular activity that came to, I was always apprehensive about exerting that energy because I have asthma. And so growing up with asthma and just having to take certain medications and things, and it really put a mental block because I always limited myself with running, how much I would run, or if I would even have the desire to run as a part of preparing for those sports, because I was like, it's going to lead to me having an asthma attack, and I hate that, and that's the worst thing that could happen is not feeling like you can't breathe, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
So all that to say, just to kind of make the story short, is that I did have this mental block from childhood. And, right around, I did run periodically before the pandemic because I was still maintaining an active lifestyle for the most part. But with running, when the pandemic hit and the gyms closed, right, because I was in New Jersey at the time.
Yeah.
And I was like, yo, I got to do something. I can't just, I know I need to get out. I need to be physical. Like, I know, I haven't really ran like that, on a regular basis. I got to start doing something. So it started with a little bit of walking, but then I joined my church, actually had a running group, and I joined that running group
nice.
during the pandemic. And being around, for me, what it involved is being in a community of people that were also doing that. It pushes you. And so once I was joining that group, I also found myself doing it outside and realizing how beneficial it was. And then in turn, also realizing that, which I found out a few years before, is that I'm technically in like a honeymoon phase with my asthma, and I haven't had any flare-ups in over 10 years.
Oh, nice.
And so, realizing that, okay, I'm not having the same reaction I did as a kid. And I can also build my endurance up to a point where, realizing that basically it was possible, but it took certain factors to be put in place to realize that was possible for me.
Yeah.
So while that might work for me, and I know, for you, that's like a big thing for you, but running, I'm not going to say running is for everyone. But I definitely try to challenge people to find what the physical activity is for you that is going to be, not only beneficial physically, but mentally for you, so that you can feel those benefits, the less stress, sleeping better, overall just mood. It just affects every part of your mental health. So if you can find a physical activity that does that for you, why not?
Yeah, and I believe, a lot of things we have in common too, because during the pandemic. Actually, I think that's when I first started running too, actually. Or really getting out there and running. And it was with my family and my wife and her mom, and we all meet up and we worked out and we went for a little run. And then it was cool, you know, we got out. And then a few months later, I found out I had a, I don't know if I think we talked about that. It was called what's the word? Mitochondria? No.
The heart condition.
Yeah, it's minor. I believe it's minor. It's just some swelling around the heart, but anything to do with the heart, I don't know. It's something that we had to take precaution. But anyway, I was like, you know what? I haven't lived the most healthy lifestyle in the past. I've been through a lot of stuff, and I did a lot of things that probably weren't beneficial to me. So now at this point in my life, I'm very, very focused on just making sure I live the healthiest I can, get out there running and push myself mentally and physically, because like you said, challenging yourself, like running is not easy. Like some days you might wake up and have that mile or 2 or 3 run, and it could be really difficult or challenging. You might not want to, you know, but if you get through it, the results after, you feel great. You're like, wow, I did it, you know. And we both ran a half marathon, and you know that's challenge. That's very challenging. I ran my first one last January. I know you ran yours, and it's very challenging, but it's super rewarding. And now I'm going for a full marathon.
Oh, God bless you.
It's just like it's just like pushing yourself, right? Like it's uncomfortable.
For sure.
It's uncomfortable. Some of the top people I follow in the world that may be super fit and live this super great lifestyle, they'll tell you some days they dread the next day because they know they're gonna go work out and run, but they might not want to. But they still do it.
Right.
They still do it, you know?
Yeah.
So did you feel the running helped you with helping others as well? Like you getting in that mind state?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for me, you know, working as a mental health practitioner, right? One of the things, it always comes up with every client I talk to, like physical activity, incorporating some type of physical activity, walking, you know, running, whatever they're able to find that works for them. And it actually has motivated me to say, okay, so if I'm telling clients and if I'm talking to them about this, I also need to be kind of subscribing to what I'm teaching. I know the science behind it. I know I've already experienced how it works. Why wouldn't I make this a regular part of my routine and my day to day, and I'm not doing it every day, but just part of that routine and weekly schedule? Why wouldn't I do that? And so it also gives me the ability to also relate to my clients in the sense that the difficulty, like you mentioned, you know, people know that they have to, I have to get up the next day, I have to do this. I'm actually feeling that struggle myself, so it allows me to develop this empathy on a deeper level with the clients I'm working with. So, because I understand the struggle, and I can't really, I can't obviously relate with all the issues or things that they've gone through, but if something like this is a mental block for them, if I myself am putting it into practice, it allows me to connect in a different way with them about it.
No, it makes sense. That makes sense. And maybe, do you have any examples or any stories of maybe someone previously or recently that, like, are there some people that you get this schedule to and the routine and they don't follow, and maybe they wish they did maybe later on, or like?
Oh, for sure. So I mean, I think one of the challenges, in having worked with children and teens is having to encourage parents to get their kids involved in some type of physical activity. So as I mentioned, I've seen a lot of different, mental health disorders. One of the big ones that I've actually worked with outside of the trauma is ADHD. Yeah. And so kids with ADHD, they have all of this energy, and I've always tried to format that as a strength. So if, yes, they have all this energy, yes, they can be hyperactive and distracted and disruptive, but if that if we're kind of redirecting that into a positive and putting that energy into a place where it can actually be utilized for good, like a sport, like a physical activity, something like that, as opposed to just focusing on the medications and the other things that we want to put in place, we could actually help balance out some of the problematic behaviors by having them engage in physical activity. And I mean, the thing is that one of the challenges I face as a therapist working with kids and teens is that sometimes, and the parents were looking for the quick fix, right? And so physical activity and exercise, that's more on a longer scale.
Yeah.
But I did find that, giving a schedule, trying to help them implement routine was one way that, okay, if I'm putting this on a schedule, if the parents were modeling the behavior and doing the activity, that would make it easier for obviously the kid to do it as well. So that was one way I did it with that demographic of patients. Now recently I have a client that I actually just started working with, and she mentioned, physical, she has a specific health condition, and physical activity would actually directly benefit her health condition. But she always had that mental block with doing physical activity. So, I mean, basically I validated it. I get it. Trying to make any physical activity or exercise part of your routine is hard.
Yeah.
But I think what happens is one of the big mental blocks is we think physical activity, and we say, oh, we look at someone else and say, oh, they're running, or oh, they're doing CrossFit, or oh, they're doing bodybuilding, I need to do that. And the reality is you need to find the exercise or activity that works for you.
Yeah.
So I kind of helped reframe this and said, hey, I get it, it's hard, and I'm with you, but why don't you make, the goal is actually for this summer, she's going to be exploring different types of exercises. So it's more of a fun thing. Like, I'm just going to go on this journey of exploring difficult physical activities, and I'm going to find the one that works for me. It doesn't mean I have to commit to, I'm going to run. I'm not going to make an unrealistic goal and run 5 days a week, because I know that I don't know if that works for me yet. I want to try yourself the space to experiment and try different things instead of blocking yourself and saying, I'm not doing that like they are. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's easy to see someone else, especially on the media. There's a lot of fit people, right? And there's a lot of, but what you don't see is all the hard work they put in before that, the years and years of development,
Right.
It doesn't happen
For
overnight.
sure.
And you see the transformations too. People that were super unhealthy, lived a crazy lifestyle, and they transformed themselves. But no, I agree. That's really good. Let them explore. And that's the big thing on the unknown, like the brand, Unknown Simplicity. Like, you have to go and just explore like we talked the other day, everything's unknown, right? Like, we're not going to know what you like, what you don't like until you try it. And like you said, running's not for everybody. CrossFit's not for everybody, but you will find something you like to do, whether that's going out in nature and just exploring, do some hiking or anything, going on the beach, taking a walk. Yeah, everybody has to find their thing. Let me ask you, from adults, say someone like me too, because I'm very busy, as you know, have a few businesses I'm working on, I have kids at home, a wife, and I'm always not, as much as I'm running and I'm working out and I'm running the business and I'm active, I could use the help too, as well as my kids. I'm always down to learn. So do you have some advice for me and other parents out there, or just anybody listening, practical steps that we could take now that can help us out?
So, I mean, obviously, the first thing I mentioned is definitely consult your healthcare practitioner, somebody you're meeting with, because I don't go on this journey and not have, especially if they have a current health condition, not have some type of intel or just advice from a person in the medical field, right? Because I don't want you to go, hey, you have a condition and you're doing, maybe cardio is not something you should be doing right now. Maybe you should be starting with strength training, but I can't specifically do that for your condition. So that's always going to be my first recommendation. Next is, I think a lot of times what happens with people is we struggle because we're not doing it with some type of accountability or maybe community or something, right? Some of us have determination to do that within ourselves, right? Like we can be disciplined enough that if I put this on my calendar and I see it pop up, it's going to make me do it. But be real with yourself. If you're not that type of person, tell, your partner, tell a friend, tell someone, like get somebody to kind of keep you accountable in doing that so that until you develop the discipline to do it yourself. And then I also just recommend to still be accountable to some extent with people. If you have a therapist, you can definitely make that a part of, your goals in therapy. If you have a life coach, there's so many different avenues of doing it if you don't have a friend or someone that you feel like you can be connected to. And then I guess the last step is to kind of just kind of like I said before, is just find what works for you. Don't compare someone else's progress or what you're seeing on the gram. I would say if you're doing physical activity, try your best to be disconnected from things, within reason. So it is having those mental health benefits, right? If you're walking on the treadmill and all you're doing is scrolling through Instagram or doing something that is kind of blocking from, you're seeing other people doing well. It's not going to feed you in the way that it should. Yeah. And so find what works for you. Don't compare your progress to someone else's. Make goals for yourself, set objectives for yourself, and find a routine and a physical activity that works for you.
That's awesome, and I just want to bring up real quick before we close out, you said community, and that's something I'm big on right now. Like, just the other day on Tuesday, I went for a run. It was in Brickell downtown, my first time I went there, and it's in, in front of this hotel or something. Everybody meets up, like a lot of people, and you see different ages, you see different weight, different ethnicities, and it's like we're all coming together for the same journey, right?
Yeah.
We're all going. It was a 3.5 mile run. I thought it was 5, but it was a 3.5 mile run, and we run in sections. So the slower people go first, the medium, and then the faster. But everybody's there together, lifting each other up. It was very, very good. I love community-based stuff like that. So yeah, anything community, look around wherever you're at. Everyone has something going on, and
right.
And everybody's there to help each other. We're all there for the same purpose, to better ourselves. So that and authenticity and accountability, like you said, those are big things too. Find someone that will hold you accountable, someone that you could trust, and then that's a big thing. I talk about that a lot. Man, that was really good. Do you want to maybe close out and tell people where they can find you if they're interested in finding out some more information?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm currently working for a private practice and getting ready to start my own practice. So I'm in that transition phase now. And so if people want, the best way right now is actually email. Okay. So I'll say it real quick and then you could put it in the show credits. So it's JACQUIGONLCSW at gmail.com.
Perfect. Man, Jacqui, thank you so much. Man, you helped me a lot, actually. You really did. And I hope a lot of people can learn something from this too. And maybe, hopefully one day we could do this again.
Yeah, for sure. I'm down.
And then good luck on your new business venture, and we'll talk soon.
All right. Sounds good.